Max Orland, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Roy Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. Thank goodness it's over. No, I'm not talking about how your AFL fantasy season is going, although maybe that is an apt sentiment and statement. I'm referring to finally the end of the bye rounds for 2024. It is best 22 for the rest of the year. But the good news is there is still a ton of stuff we've got to get to. I want to help you find some players on a budget throughout this podcast episode. We've got to talk about the tag. There's some big headaches and some feels like really easy free hits that coaches are wanting to trade into, and a bunch of other stuff we're going to get through right throughout this AFL Fantasy Strategy Roundtable. Joining me on this podcast, though, he's been a regular part of the Coaches Panel over a number of years and is our mid-season specialist. We always seem to find a way to get 4 or 5 weeks in the middle of the year with him. Jordox, nice to have you back on the podcast. He's also a part of the Fantasy Fanatics crew with Bales and Guesty. Mate, nice to have you back on. Thank goodness the buys are over. Hey, my friend.
It is good. I mean, because you can now, you look at your team under a new lens and it always looks so much better than, when you got these kids on. But I tell you, it's funny that the buys are over, but I've just become so used to best 18 that my reaction when a player has a really crap score is sort of like, well, that's all right. That's gone now. I'm a bit scared now. It's like, oh, goodness. Oh. No more 40s, please, all of you. You're on notice.
Oh, I don't know about you, but I've really not enjoyed that part of this season with just so many bye rounds. I know it's a positive way we've navigated through the season, but I've found it frustrating. While it's great moving for those of us in contention, just watching these scores drop out. I know we've had price movements. Personally, for me, I just love more best 22 weeks. I'm not a huge fan of 18s, and given 2/3 of the season have been best 18, I'm a bit like, oh, well, this is a bit flattening and disheartening. I love the idea of getting stuck with a 30 and coming against people's 80s with it.
Yeah, it's made it kind of harder to track how you're going during the weekend, which, for someone like me is good. It means I maybe look at my phone slightly less than I would.
Your wife's happier about it, yes.
Yep, absolutely, to a point. But I think, the reach of the Coaches Panel is pretty large, and I think the powers that be at AFL headquarters will be listening. I don't think we're going to have this many bye rounds, best 18s next year. I think they might tweak opening round just a bit.
Let's hope so. It's been a great learning season, and I don't know, for a number of people that it's been a great outcome this year, and certainly not knocking any format's done, but for me, certainly would love to see a return to more best 22 football. But as you mentioned, the buys do bring up a bunch of different differentiations for us. And one of them is we're probably really only a week away now from getting a truest reflection of where our ranks are. We're in a bit of a pretty good guesstimate, I think, Jordox, you could say, as most people know the realms that they're in, but really it's after this week, all the teams are back on deck. Those that have been just sideways trading through the buys, as opposed to those that have been on an upgrade cadence, we'll kind of see who's been out swimming with their trunks on and who's going to get caught with the rip coming back in, metaphorically speaking, a little bit. So we really are probably, for teams that are contending, Jordox, we're probably at luxury trades for them after this week, whereas teams that are a little bit behind either in cash generation or in rankings are probably a further week behind that, and it'll be 2 weeks away from a luxury trades. This is the time of year where it can be a frustrating moment where you think you're trading into a guy with a better fixture or a better matchup, and you could lose 20 or 30 points while doing a quote-unquote uptrade. So while it's a luxurious time of year for many coaches after this week, it can be sometimes you're undoing just having almost too many trades.
It's dangerous. And it's such a balance, particularly in this form of the game in AF, where you've got the 2 every week to use them or lose them. You do run the risk of getting too cute. So, yeah, this is a really interesting point of the season where some of the moves you pull now could really be the difference in the end. And that may be where you end up in the ranks if that's your jam, or if you're trying to win a grand final in your league. So hopefully we can help.
So there was a player that probably 6 to 7 weeks ago, I'll be honest, I was really bullish on what I saw about him. I was with Mini Monk, fellow coaches panelist. Should be back on deck in the next week or two, by the way. Just out with injury at the moment. He'll be back on deck. Don't worry about that. We watched Clayton Oliver against Geelong on the kind of high half forward flank and just was like, wow, Clary's back to his running efforts, ball winning best, and pretty much has done nothing since that. I know at the buys, a bunch of coaches jumped off him. And then there was a portion of the community that thought, oh, actually, the rest might be all he needs. And with the rest, he comes back. He's got a good matchup against North Melbourne. It might be not as good as we think. We'll talk about that in a second. But 8% right now at time of recording, coaches are on Clayton Oliver. He's the most traded out player this week. He's had I think it's about 3 or 4% of the tournament, and the teams have jumped off him too. So it's not exactly like he's a lowly owned guy. But talk to me, is there a world where you can justify holding Clary? Or, mate, is it just as simple as just abandon the losses? It's not worked. What's your take on Clayton Oliver?
Yeah, it's kind of Groundhog Day in terms of the conversation, because we did talk about this in the buy round, in his buy round. We talked about it the week before his buy round when he scored a 67 on the King's birthday. So I think a lot of us who did have him was certainly earmarking his buy as a time to get off. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one who, in the madness of that Sunday when Jai Simpkin was out, shifted things around and then found a way where I actually kept him, and then thought, oh, you know what? That might actually be pretty handy holding on to him for the rest of the year. Look, I actually think this conversation, you just need to forget about last Saturday night, referring to the North Melbourne game where Oliver scored 1 point in the first half and then brought it home with a whopping 25. So scored a 26, copped a very strong tag. Look, I'm not making excuses, but I'm probably where I was 7 days ago, 14 days ago. Do you have to trade him? No. Should you? Yeah, probably, because you're going to be able to. There's going to be, someone we'll talk about later who's a similar price who's going the opposite direction, right? Whereas a couple of weeks ago there wasn't too many sideways trades for him. If your hands are tied and you are stuck with much bigger fish to fry this week, and there'll be plenty in that spot, as much as some will have luxury trades, there's going to be all sorts of things going on. If you get stuck with him, I still think he can average 80 to 90 and be a somewhat meaningful member of your squad. But realistically, if you are keeping, I would be trying to push him to M9 with your other trades and looping. So this Friday, he's away at the Gabba. We're all trading him probably. We're all thinking he's done. Let's see what the kid's made of. I bet he bounces back. I'm not talking 120, but back to 80 to 90 again. I mean, the numbers were ludicrous. No marks, 1 tackle, 5 frees against. He was playing angry, Oliver, and I don't blame him. He's had such a shocking season and to be tagged so hard. He reminds me of Lachie Neale earlier this year. He was getting some tags. He was just playing angry, and he was messing around, getting in tussles and fights. Very entertaining to watch, but just need Clary to forget that this week and chase the pill. So it's a very long-winded answer. I do apologise.
I think there's absolutely a reason for holding, but you're probably at the space where you've still, if you held 2 cash cows on field, and it's like, man, you're running a Dowling, a Revel, a McAuliffe, a Sullivan, a Schoenmaker, should he get named, for example. Like, this is the space you're sitting where even with 2 moves this week, you're stuck with cash cows on field. Then I'd sit a little bit more comfortable with it. but everything about him is heading in the reverse direction. He's leaking cash, let alone dropping points for you. And so to me, I'm probably a little more on the, unless you are stuck in that categorization of that, and probably only league focused would be the causation for me. Otherwise, I'd be, you know what, investigate all realms possible. And that brings us to probably the player you're alluding to there that I think is going to be one of the most popular, simple moves, not costing you much, in fact, at all, is jumping from Oliver straight into a Connor Rozee. 705K. His last 5 rounds doesn't look pretty with an average of 74, but that's very, very injury factored. You've got 2 games where he was subbed out with a hamstring related concern, 1 game where he basically sat forward the entire time after hurting his ankle inside the first 5 minutes. Wasn't great a fortnight ago upon return, and then last week. That's the Connor we know. Lots of uncontested possessions, lots of marks and tackle opportunities, and scoring back in the realms that really he was doing over the first 5 weeks of the year, where he went at an average of 111.8 and was tracking towards being $1 million player at that point in time. Can you believe it? How do I know that so well? Well, I probably was an owner for Connor. Maybe that's why I know the details so well. But whether it be Oliver, Friese, Sullivan, whoever it is, Jordox, this is one of the freer gifts we've got. Because the narrative of why he's so cheap is so understandable with 3 injury-impacted games. But with the ownership percentage getting so high, it does feel like a really low-risk move this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as when we jumped on Clayton Oliver 7-8 weeks ago. You know, what you're paying makes it so risk-free. You know, even the Tom Green that's been on the conversation the last few weeks, he finally popped. I guess the difference here is this is for the run home. You know, this isn't a pre-buy move to make money and then move on. You know, Rozee's he's gonna at very worst be your M8 at the end. So
yeah,
I think we just needed to see something. And he was pushing 100 at halftime on the weekend. So obviously slowed down the second half, but I think you've seen everything you need to see. You know, the numbers stack up, like you said, the marks are up, tackles are up, possessions are up. And, you know, I think he can go to another level still. You know, Port got absolutely decimated, which has been well publicised.
Yeah.
But him and Butters still racked up the pill. So I think if Port can get things in order a bit more and play some better footy, we're only going to see more of this from Rozee. And at that price, it is the bargain of the year. There will not be a better one than this.
Yeah. I know we want to talk about tags in a moment, but politely, with a Butters and a Horn Francis also in that midfield, as brilliant as Connor is, and he's a phenomenally talented footballer, if you are choosing to lock down him as the silky ball user through the midfield and the high endurance athlete and the link up and transition scoring, and allow the Horn Francis and the Butters, who are going to impact at contest spread, burst from contested and congested moments, it's your own funeral if you're going to choose to tag as an opposition coach and do that. So I'm with you. I just feel like the reason Connor's cheap is so believable and understandable, whereas Oliver was always, he's just not had a preseason. He's just not had a preseason. And that might still be the case, but it senses and seems like it's more than just that. Whereas Connor, man, why is he so cheap? Well, hamstring injury, club and he rushed back, kind of didn't make it any better, hurts his ankle against North Melbourne. Now he's bottomed out in price for us. And the other element is his ownership. I think it's 16% now. He's the most traded in player in AFL fantasy this week. So you've got this combination of a narrative for why he's cheap. A guy that this year, so not going into 2023 data, has a 5-game average of 110 plus, is at a price point that now such a high volume of the format is into him. There's just no risk to me in jumping into Connor. So I understand it. It might not be the number one priority for coaches because they've made other moves around it. But to me, he just feels like the absolute no-brainer move for this week. And I couldn't find flaw in that. I think there's others you could go to over him and he'd still be valued next week, whereas these players might not. But he's absolutely a great pick, and I wouldn't shout down anyone for doing it.
It's 15K from Oliver, so you can ride the same, ride in terms of price with a much more.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Secure player than Clary.
Yeah, it's true. Over the past couple of weeks, it's been in our midfields we've noticed it the most. And in the fantasy community, and that's generalization, not AFL fantasy specific, but the fantasy football community broadly, probably the more serious hardcore coach, which is listening to the coaches panel, probably has picked up on it a little bit faster than the average media narrative, which is the return of the negating midfielder or the tagger. They've jumped on it over the past kind of 2 to 3 weeks, the media, but really we've been seeing it for 4 to 6 weeks. We've seen the return of these lockdown sort of players. You mentioned it about Clayton Oliver before. Maybe coming back to him, like Will Phillips is finding, I wouldn't say he's found, but finding a role in that spot and actually done a pretty good job now over the last couple of weeks. And he's not the only a Toby Bedford a fortnight ago. I don't think anyone had on their 2024 fantasy bingo card that Bedford would tag Butters and do it effectively. And he's done it. He's now done it 2 weeks in a row. James Jordan, up until last week, has really clamped down on the best rebounding running carry defender, but kind of let Whitfield go for portions of that game. Windhager, Chincotta, even a Neil Bullen at times has been really challenging for us. And then there's Jared Berry.
Even the Crows, and I don't know why they're doing it. They're just trying anything at the minute. But Max Michelini in the last game out before the bye, he played pretty much pure on the ball to tag Chad Warner. And did a great job. It's like, So even if you're coming up against Crows, I mean, Ben Keys used to do it, bit of a forward tag. I can't think of any real big tags at the Crows in recent times. But yeah, no one's safe, MJ. There is not a club you can play against, I don't think, just about, where your primo mid is safe.
Well, Tom Green got tagged by Mark Blixarves pre-buy. And again, it's these moves that coaches are experimenting, and I love seeing it. But for a fantasy coach, it means, geez, you're hoping your VC pops because you just don't want to run that gauntlet sometimes. So I reckon there's probably 7 guys at the moment that feel like they're the tag concern. And so we might not do it every week, but just this week, for example, I think we should at least look at this serious 7 stoppers that we might need to look at. I've put Jared Berry in the mix of that because when he does tag, not he is a tagger, but when he does tag, Jordox, it is not a fun experience for that player or for the fantasy owner. Do you see a world where he goes to Clayton Oliver this week?
Oh, almost 100% he goes to Oliver because look how well, a young, well, Phillips isn't that young, mind you, but an inexperienced guy like him last week just crushed him. And not only did he tag him into, not getting the pill, like I said, he was angry. He was giving away frees. I couldn't imagine an argument for Brisbane to say, no, let's let him run. Even if it's not a hard full tag like we just saw, it'll be enough. So maybe I should change my answer to before and tag Oliver, trade Oliver out because I don't think we don't have best 18 this week, so no more 26s, please.
No, those all fall out. Toby Bedford's been the surprising move. Now he's tagged more, Warner last week, and then Butters the week before. So you'd probably think coming up against the Crows, Dawson would be the one you'd stop. But physically, I don't think Bedford has the skill set to go with him. Rather, if they're going to lock down on any Crow that rolls through the midfield based on Bedford being the premise that he's the goer, geez, Isaac Rankin could find himself with some attention this week.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Dawson's big, and we'll talk about Bont possibly at some point, but it's hard to tag those guys because they're so big, because they can go forward, then they can go behind the ball. They can kind of go anywhere, and Dawson's very much in that conversation. Whereas Rankin, he's building as a midfielder. He's quite young in terms of, well, he's a young player, but he's young in terms of his midfield craft and developing into what the Crows hope he can be. So he's very taggable. So yeah. I think we'll see Bedford run with him. I would be surprised if it changed as the game went. If Dawson does get out of control, maybe they put him there to just, what was that term that coaches used to come up with when they didn't want to say taggers? Coolers.
Coolers, stoppers, negating midfielders. Yes.
Yeah. Just
all those
go and cool
terms.
his jets for me, will you, son?
Does a Lockie Neal get his namesake in Alex Neil Bullen?
Yep. I think that's it's kind of the same. Like last week, Port didn't really. I didn't watch that game, but from what I can tell, Port just kind of went head to head with their midfield, and that was great for fantasy because all the mids were just going ape in that game, which was great.
Yeah, they did.
But no, Neil Bullen, who was run with Nick Dacos on King's birthday?
Couple of weeks ago, he did a job. So it's not a normative every week for Melbourne.
Nah.
And their midfield has changed a little bit over the past few weeks with no Christian Petrarcas, but it's a contention to consider for coaches. That's for sure. One that's almost certain is a James Jordan is heading towards a Jordan Clark. I'm pretty confident. I know some go, he might go to Luke Ryan. Nope. I think he's going to Jordan Clark if he's going anywhere. Butters is likely to get a Windhager tag should the Saints roll that tag. And they haven't done that every week, to be fair, but he's probably the one alongside the Hornet you're looking at.
He's very much like, a Chincotta as well. Like, if he's tagging your guy, he doesn't want the footy at all. He is the sort of tagger that would make Ryan Crowley proud. He's very good at it. I just kind of remembered we did in the 50 most relevant this year. I'm pretty sure we did. I jumped on and did the Zach Butters episode, and the conversation was who gets the tag. I'm still firmly of the belief that they might start with a tag on Butters and then at halftime switch to Rozee if Rosee's getting out of control. So I'm not as nervous about that in terms of, owning a Butters or a Rozee, but I am scared of Windhager. He can tag someone into a very poor score.
You mentioned an Alex Chincotta. I think probably up until a week ago, we thought he was going to midfielders and rebounding defenders, whereas last week he went to the interceptor in Tom Stewart and did a brilliant job. And so I don't think he's heading to the midfield, although you could build a case he goes to a Shai Bolton and he'll happily go into the back line where he's sort of started his career at Carlton. You could build a case for a Jaden Short, but maybe we do see a Nick Vlosten who more draft than classic relevant. Chincotta could go that way too and head to Vlossie. Which of those sort of three options? I know it's hard to know exactly how the Blues think. Do they go for the star impact mid forward in a Bolton or Dusty? Do they go for the run and carry of Short, or do they go for the interceptor and really the general of that backline in Nick Vlosten?
Well, based on the conversation we had last week, MJ, this will make your head spin. I actually think Chincotta will run with Taranto. And I know that sounds odd, but I think Taranto is their main man at the moment.
Yep.
I know he's only been back for 2 weeks, but if I'm Carlton, that's who I'm locking down, because Shai Bolton, you've got to keep an eye on him, but he can go in and out of games. you've got Short and Floster. No, I just think he's going to go with the best mid, and that's Taranto. So we'll wait and see.
We shall wait and see. Don't mind. I love someone that's prepared to make a ballsy call. Then Will Phillips, we've got to talk about. He was the guy that we got there in the end with Clayton Oliver the past fortnight. You could genuinely build a case for 3 Bulldogs midfielders, but I'm going to fade Adam Treloar out of the conversation because I think there's 2 that supremely step over Adam at stoppage, and that's Liberatore and Bontempelli. I've got a leaning towards which one I think he's more physically able to prevent getting the ball as much as possible. But which of the 2 do you think Will Phillips is going to go to? Libba or the Bont?
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
I say this with the greatest respect to Will Phillips, and I may end up with egg on my face, but I think Bont will just shrug him off. I don't think he'll be able to go with Bont. Again, a guy like Bont who can go forward, who can go back. And I'd be very amazed if Phillips went to him and did a great job. If he does, then he's locked into North 22 for the foreseeable future. So that does leave Libba, who I think, how many games has he had back since they had concerns? 1 or 2?
A couple. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple. Yeah. So he's probably ready to start hitting his straps again. I think Libba would be the smart one to put Phillips on. And look, that's not to say you let Bont run wild.
Sure.
Which I saw on X. Someone brought up Huey Greenwood. Remember him? About bringing him in, to
2016 says hello. Yep.
Yeah. But I don't think they'll do that. But they can't let Bont completely free. But I just don't think you can clamp him like you could a Libba.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I think if Phillips is playing any negating role, Liberatore is physically dimensional, much more likely to sit alongside what he could stop, rather than just the size and shape of Bont is so much harder. It doesn't mean he can't do it, but yeah, to me, I think I tend to agree with that. There's this time of season that we're now at where we're post-buys, couple of months left to go. We're basically in the teens of trades left for the year, which is scary when you say it like that after basically burning through a teenage amount of trades over the last month, given we've had the extra trades available to us. We're into the mid-teens to higher teens of trades left for your 2024 season, which is obviously where we've talked about luxury trades at the top. But there's this other junction that comes in the year. And for the past decade, I've been playing fantasy footy. It's happened every year where clubs and coaches start to make adjustments in the back half of the season. Traditionally, it's for teams that are not contending and they're trying to experiment with things. Sometimes it's a forced injury that pushes the narrative through. But historically, it's not. We're going to change a few things up and or an injury hits, and we start to see some players have some role changes. They find themselves in fantasy football relevant opportunities, and these are players that are priced at a significantly lower price range, just storm home the season. One of the most recent of memories is a Sam Flanders last year. If you didn't have Flanders last year, you missed out on one of the bargains of the year. And he was priced nowhere near premium territories in the middle portion of the year. But by the end of the year, he was not just scoring like, but was priced like one of the top line options available to us. And so what I want to do, Jordox, is look at, you give me 5 players that are priced between the range of 800K and 700K. I'll pick 5 that are ranged between 700K and 600K. Or you can have a couple of shout outs and notable omissions if you just want to sneak a few extra names in there. But really the parameters I think we want to look for is guys that for whatever reason, because of price, role, injury, experimental opportunities, whatever it be, you look at them and go, in this price range and based on the position they have, I believe they could score in the territory of the top liners and they're not priced at that. And they could be the steam trains standout for 2024, at least over this next 2 months. So your parameters, nothing over 800K, nothing under 700K. Don't you dare take any of mine. That's my territory, Fred.
You've got the real juicy ones.
Oh, I definitely do. Give us 5 names, but before you do, any notable shout outs that don't make your fab steam train 5?
Yes. Probably a couple of guys that, I don't think now is the time to ride home, but they should be penciled in for some starting squads next year, and we'll have a really good look at them. Guys like younger guys like Durham for Essendon, who is flying. He hasn't gone over a ton yet. He's just scoring 90s, but yeah, just one to keep an eye on. George Wardlaw is looking incredible as well.
It's a good run home, the North midfield. Yep.
Yeah. You've got Will Day again. He's a pretty good. Actually, no, he'd be one for now. You could definitely do. And then Elliot Yeo as well. I mean, I don't think Yeo's going to be an option for us next year. But he's
good shout outs that don't even make you 5, mate.
Yeah.
Like there's a world where I see Will Day go on 105 from now to the end of the year.
Yeah, to be honest, when I prepped this, I forgot about Day, so I just threw him in then. But they're my special mentions, so I can get cracking on the 5 if you want.
All right. Who have you got? Number 1.
No surprises. Will be one of the most popular trading targets this week after Rozee, and that's Jai Caldwell.
Yep.
Caldwell's a guy who's been around for a few years. He's always had fantasy chops. Didn't quite get the opportunities at his GWS days. Came to Essendon, got injured, and has just been building. And his building has, I won't say erupted, but he was incredible on the weekend. Posted a career high 126, season high time on ground. There was a period where I wasn't too sure about him, just with guys like Darcy Parish coming back. It doesn't matter. Caldwell's in the guts till the end. He won't have forward status next year for any keeper owners. I think you can get that out of your head. And he's under 800 in a forward line that, there's not a lot of obvious options. I think he's the most obvious pick. And, a lot of people jumped on in the last couple of weeks and we're very much rewarded on the weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah, good shout. No arguments from me, mate. Who else is next?
A guy who, with Jack Steele, was the number 1 a couple of years ago, Took Miller. I can't really speak to what the reason has been for his lower scores this year, but priced at under 800. Sorry, I lost him. Here he is.
I was about to say, he's under the parameters, I hope, mate.
Yeah.
Don't you sneak in this Tim Taranto. That's who I'd say if I was going over 900K, but no.
No, he's copping the tag this weekend, Jack. No, so Took 786K, so just under 800. Someone that I've been very interested in for a while because of the price and just need to see it. And, after getting slaughtered by Windhager before the bye with a 47, he, against the Dockers on the weekend, was just the Took Miller we've come to know and love. A 130, 30-plus touches, 8 marks, 6 tackles. Yeah. So, you could argue, he had a great game, but he'll revert back to what he's been doing. I feel like he's going to finish the year big.
Nice. It's a good shout. Shout.
Another one is, incredibly obvious, but Tom Green is still under 800, 770K. We finally saw Jon MJ. I mean, I saw, who was it? Fantasy Freako tweeted, what did he say? That's a reward for owners or, something. And I thought, no, not the guys that jumped on in the bye rounds. Well, I've had him since round one, and he started like, wow, this is the best pick ever, and it's been such a boring ride ever since. Anyway, the shackles are off. He's back. He's got the Crows this week. I reckon another 120 minimum this week, and he finishes the year roaring home.
Nice. Yep.
The next two are a bit more speculative, and
like
they're not in the midfield spot, so that probably makes sense. So, first one is a guy that I've been on the record as saying on Fantasy Fanatics pods that I don't want to borrow this guy ever again, but you have to look at James Sicily. He's 788k.
Yep.
What I like about and how I can sort of frame the argument to go against, why I've always avoided him is the Hawks are humming at the minute. Like if you're a Hawks fan right now, you are so ahead in your rebuild. It's not even funny. It's enough to make Crows fans sick, I believe.
Oh.
Anyway. But back to my point. Hawks are flying. They are playing really good footy. They're knocking on the door of the 8. I don't think they'll get there. That means the captain can sit back and just do what he does best. Seagull around, just correct, straighten them up. Boys, give it to me. No, let's go this way. Actually, give it back. Okay, another +6. 15 marks he took before the bye against the Tigers and scored a whopping 137. So for under 800k, I can see him going really well in the run home. He's a trickier one to sell, though, because I think everyone's pretty comfortable with their back six.
Yep.
We haven't been short of defender primos this year. So
nope.
If you can squeeze and push someone to D7 and loophole a Sicily, but that's extreme luxury. And then the last one is one close to my heart, and Isaac Rankin.
Nice.
We talked about him before in terms of him developing into this midfield role. He was really just starting to get going before the hammy got him a few weeks ago against Collingwood. Came back. His scoring probably still isn't quite there, but I think and hope the Crows can just sort their issues out and hopefully finish the year with some better performances, because if they do, Rankin will be scoring very well.
Yeah, I'm interested in Rankin at F6. I think that's outside of the Super 3 that we've talked and everybody else has talked about over the year, he's as good as any option at F6. And you don't need 12, 20 great weeks of scoring. You just need, 6-8 weeks, basement of 70s, and can he jag the odd 110, 120? And if he does that, well, he's in that same range that people are looking at Jackson, Moore, even a Caldwell, who outside of last week hasn't showed a huge ceiling for us. So I don't mind that. And I think Sicily sits in that range of, he's a 90 guy. And if you can pop the 130 ceiling game, I don't mind that as well. So they're good names. I like it. I think you've nailed a couple of those real good ones. So some good ones for us to think about it, but they're not probably in the depths of crazy value that coaches might be looking for some more Hail Mary style picks. So if you're looking at the budget of under 700K and hoping to get something that could score comparable to what Jordox has just put out there, and he's given us some names that honestly could go 110 plus over the next couple of months. Let's head to the depths of Mordor without going too crazy under 600K and see what I can find for you. At 692,000, this player's got an average of 79.1, but in his last three, he's gone a 71, a 101, and last week had a role change, moved into the midfield and looked awesome. And the coach highlighted just how brilliant he was with a 110 last week. I'm talking about Melbourne's Trent Rivers, skillful, classy, speed, run and carry, offering a new dynamic to that midfield. And you mentioned that most teams probably aren't looking for a D6, but if you flip a Young, a Dacos into that midfield 8 spot, given how well our rebounding defenders are scoring, and in Rivers' case, moving into the midfield where you're not stopping him over a Clayton Oliver type. I really like Trent at under 700K. I'm a big rap on him.
Well, we asked we asked the question when Petrarca went down, who's going to get the bump? You know, was it a Cozzy Pickett? Is it a Salem? Is it a Rivers? And it was Rivers. And what I love about that move and the confidence, I guess, in his role is Simon Goodwin's kind of already said, we tried that, we loved it, we're doing it again. So we kind of already know, at the very least, we'll see him in that role for one more.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm going to stay in the defensive line for my next two options as well, for a number of reasons. Like I said, you can easily move one of your mid defenders into that midfield spot. You move one of your options around. I think, if anywhere, coaches are still looking to make an upgrade into that midfield, and this could be the pathway to get you there.
Could be a Zach Fisher or a Sexton sitting.
Yep.
D6. You could
in the
swing
back line.
Forward. Yep.
It's a good shout. There's multiple ways of getting there. Again, under 700,000, I'll go even lower. I'm just going to work my way down the price range for you. At 667K, he's got a history of going 90 plus pretty much when he's injury free over the past 4 or 5 years. And he's coming off the back of his best two scores of the year, 100 and a 106. Jaden Short. I'm not a huge rap on many Tigers for fantasy this year. Taranto, I'm very, very bullish on as a trade in. If I was spending over 900K in the mids, I still think he's the pick of the litter for me over 900K. But geez, Jaden Short, he's got the history. And the past fortnight, it does feel like he and the Tigers have just found a little bit more mojo in the way they're moving the ball.
Yeah, I like Short. I actually didn't forget about him, but I was surprised when you said him when we chatted pre-pod about his recent scoring and that he had popped a couple of tons. I hadn't noticed. So 667, that is cheap. And if we can get anywhere near the Jaden Short of recent years, you know, obviously the Damien Hardwick era, but it's not just because Damien Hardwick was there. The guy can fantasy. It's just if he can get that role. And again, under 700, that surprised me. That's a good price.
Yeah, again, we're looking for a guy that can contend with the top end options at a significant discounted range. That's what this 5-player steam train absolutely go Flanders like for us. I've got him in there. You mentioned Damien Hardwick. I'm going to bring up one of his current players now, oddly enough, in that rebounding kind of role. Back after a club and AFL enforced 5-game suspension, and he came back straight into that distribution role, moved Sexton out and up to the wing. Clearly, that tells me a lot about how highly they value a Will Powell and just what they want to see him doing. At 652K, the 2 weeks prior, he was going at 86 or 70, 84 or 76, and then the 111 on the weekend. You're probably a bit more inclined to spend the 40K extra and go to Rivers. I could understand that. But to me, clearly they love Powell in that spot. They brought him straight back from suspension. They moved the players that were playing that distribution role out and put him back in there. There's just something about him that I could see him going 95 for the rest of the year without even thinking too much about it.
And he only took the one kick in. So
yep.
Sometimes when a player doesn't get the kick ins, it's like, that's bad. But actually, if you're receiving the kick in, you can get 6 points instead of 3. So I think we must have seen a bit of that on the weekend. I like Powell. I think of the names you've mentioned is the only one that makes me the most nervous so far, just because we've seen Gold Coast change their designated kickers a few times already within the season.
Absolutely.
But as you mentioned, he came straight back in, not via the VFL, and straight into that role. I think that is telling.
Well, if you like a high risk profile with not a high reward, then let's start heading to the forward line at under 650K.
Oh, you sell it so well, MJ.
Well, there's a reason for it.
No.
642. Let's be honest, F6 isn't fun, but if you can do it at a nice fixture run over a couple of weeks, which I think this player has. And over the past 3 weeks, his lowest score is 82 and his top score is a 104. And he's not getting a heavy midfield role, but yet still scoring, basically 90 over his last 3, is a Taylor Adams. He's about 100K cheaper than a Jai Caldwell, and being within a handful of points over the last 3 weeks near him. It's a high risk pick because he doesn't have stability of consistent through that midfield. Those centre bouts role does feel really locked away of who they want to have in there. And Mills is still at least 3 weeks away, by the way. So let's put Mills out of the equation here.
Okay. Yep.
But to me, if you're looking for a forward at under 650, I've got a better option for you in a minute. But if you've already got that option and you're still desperate to fill your forward line out and you've got the big 3 and you don't want to pay up, quote unquote, for the Caldwells, the Rankins, the Moores, you've lost love and trust in the McRaes and Jacksons and whoever else that's let you down that's a premium, quote unquote, forward this year, you could do worse. Maybe not much worse, but you could do worse.
No. I think there's merit to it. I mean, he's not going to hit the heights of his heyday at Collingwood when he was a halfback, pure mid, but he does have a ceiling. And I like to look. You talked about the run home and like players with the role change, or maybe the coach has been sacked. They got a new coach. That's what happened with Flanders last year.
You know when you reach that age where everyone and their mother won't shut up about their credit scores, yet it seems like no one really understands what's so special about those 3 random numbers? That's because credit scores are meaningless, unless you have Credit Karma to show you how to use them. We use those 3 random numbers, plus your financial profile, to help you find your next opportunity. Like a more rewarding credit card, a game plan that helps you pay down debt faster, or a personal loan to help you save more on interest payments each month. Cha-ching! Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
I also look at players with motivations beyond, the team game. And sometimes this is just a case of looking for anything. But, Taylor Adams, he's been around a long time and he missed that grand final. He missed that premiership. He's playing for a team who are, at the moment, everyone is saying it's Sydney versus who in the granny.
Yeah.
He's going to be fighting tooth and nail to keep his spot because you've got guys like Luke Parker still in the background. There's going to be other guys trying to take that role off him. I just think he's going to be playing his absolute best. And that sounds silly. Every player tries their hardest. But I think you know what I mean. The extra motivation to get himself, a premiership. So, we're at going through the dregs here. So
I told you.
If I can pitch the selfish motivation of a premiership for an individual, then it'd be Taylor Adams.
Yeah. He's not my number 1 forward pick, but if you've got that option, who we'll get to in a second, then sure, go for it. For me, if you're spending money on anyone under 700K this week, it's got to be this player. That's not a cash cow. Jai Simpkin. 617,000, mid-forward eligible. A seasonal average is irrelevant. We know there are a number of factors for why and how much, like Rozee, that's caused him to have such a low price point now. But in the last fortnight, an 81 against Melbourne, and then that ceiling game of the 132 against West Coast. I feel like he's going to sit in that range for us. One of, if not the best run home for midfielders, specifically players that attend centre bounce and are more the inside type over the back end of the year. It's more evident over the final 4 or 5, but it still sits solid enough for us now, is North Melbourne. It is a brilliant matchup for inside mids. There's not one red matchup, I suppose, if you want to refer to it as that, according to DFS Australia. It is all light green, white, and very dark, very good green. And he's got that midfield role now. I think with Phillips in that spot, we see a little bit more clearly North Melbourne know what they are and what they want to be. It feels like they've got that balance of, we want LDU to sit in this pocket. We want Wardlaw to sit here. We want Phillips to play this role. Then we want Simpkin to sit in that half forward but centre bounce presence. And then the likes of Powell, Sheasel, amongst others. Okay, you can rotate and sit through there for me. It's a beautiful matchup on what the next few months hold. It's a beautiful bit of value. And in a position that we're going, I don't want to spend up big because I don't trust I'm going to get primo scores. Well, at this price point, at 617K, there is no risk associated that is so alarming to me to jump off. And we've talked about how good the value of Connor Rozee is this week. And he absolutely is undeniable value. I would like to suggest that I think Jai could be just as good a value prospect when you consider price point and scoring scarcity of what it takes to be a top line forward. If he goes 85, 90 from now to the end of the year, that's top 10 forward, barring something drastically change from the front half of the season. And to do that at a scratch over 600K with a guy that's got a ceiling of 130 plus scores, what I think is a truer basement of mid-70s and the best run home for midfielders available to us in North Melbourne, I don't see them messing around with that midfield mix too much. I feel like they've done that now. They want to get some consistency. They have never looked so good in the past 5 years as they have in the past 2 weeks. And so I feel like Clarko and the list management and coaching staff have unlocked the genie a little bit with who they want where in their ideal setting. And yeah, to me, outside of Rozee, this is the best value buy you can get.
I reckon you could almost mount the argument it's on par because it's 100K less. It's in a in a trickier position, the forward line. I mean, this is the captain of the footy club. And, you know, you said it, the last 2-3 weeks, we'll make it 3 because they had the win over the Eagles. And that was when Simpkin exploded as a pure mid this year. North are starting to look like a team on the rise. And that's, you know, it's great to see, great to say, because it's been a very long few years for North fans. And, you know, the competition is better when sides like that are rising. Same with West Coast. Anyway, on to Simpkin himself, captain of the club, has a ceiling. You know, didn't go nuts with the CBAs on the weekend. They still like him off half forward, but what he's doing is he's coming into the contest from half forward. He's not just sitting back and hoping to, you know, be a lead up half forward. He's getting into the thick of it. And I think he could be a guy that really does run home at 85, 90, like you said.
Yeah, I'm big on Jai Simpkin. Last week was prime to get him. This week is still really good.
The only thing I'll say, there will be those still haunted by that fateful Sunday 2 weeks ago when he was laid out in the second last game of a bye round.
Yeah,
that's okay. You can edit your trades. The new feature is great, except not great when there's nothing to choose from. This week, that's right. This week he sat day 145, the second game of the round. Put him in your side Friday, and you can feel confident that if they do that to us again, you will have options.
You definitely will. Hey, mate, I've loved your 5 that you've given us as stream options. Hopefully the 5 I've given has been as just a pass marker given. But if you are looking for some value and some guys that could storm home at the back end, you don't have to go to the top of the tree. There's definitely an element of risk in it, but I could argue that there might be more risk when you pay top dollar, needing them to perform.
Recent Luke Ryan owners would attest to that, MJ.
That is very, very true. Hey, mate, it's been great having you on the podcast yet again, mate. Where can we get in touch with you across social media, whether it be on the Coaches Panel or Fantasy Fanatics? Where can we get in touch with you? Specifically on X, I know you're the most active.
Yeah. I'm on X at Jordox 2020, and I am over with the Fantasy Fanatics with Bales and Tim, and we do a pod on a Sunday night reviewing the round that's been. And then there's a Tuesday night Q&A as well that's live. So come and join us, get involved, have your questions answered. And then there's a Friday one as well. Bales is a machine. He's like you, MJ. He just keeps on going. So plenty of content. And great to be on, mate. Always love having a chat with you. And I love these sorts of episodes. They're a bit different. We look at very specific things. yeah, like we said at the top of the pod, that really could be the difference between you having a career year, as they say, or just another one where you're left regretting everything you do. Sounds like most of my seasons, but good to see you.
If you want to go and check out these episodes as a video podcast, you can go and do that on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, we'd encourage you to go over and do that. And if you are watching this on YouTube, comment below and let me know, what are the trade moves you're making this week? I'd love to see what they are. We'll do our best to answer and reply back to those comments as well. So jump in there and make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Every single week we drop this and other audio podcasts right throughout the season proper. And if you haven't subscribed, wherever you get your audio podcast from, wherever you're listening to this, you can find us there too. Subscribe to that. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, don't just have to leave a 5-star rating. You can also leave a little review. So I encourage you to do that while you're there as well. And you can join our Patreon supporter group. They get a ton of great different access rewards, depending on the tier level you jump in. At the Patreon, there is a ton of great stuff. If you're up at that elite premium tier, you get 4 podcasts a week from us, as well as a bunch of other great pieces of content. So if you've loved what you've got from us this season proper or through the preseason, encourage you, jump on in and become a Patreon. Well, the buys are done, and thank goodness for that. But the dash home to win a cap, to win your league, and maybe the car and a little bit of cash, all is very depending on what these next few months and the moves you make, what they hold. I can't wait to see unfold. Good luck this week. I hope the last rookie that's getting off your field, well, you don't even need him. I hope you don't have to have that. But if you do, I hope they deliver an 80-plus beautiful bonanza of score. I hope your vice captain just crushes it so you're not stuck with worrying about your captain getting a tag. And we can't wait to be back chatting with you again next week, talking all things AFL.